2009. Call of Duty World at War is sweeping online play, and everyone is pumped for the future online phenomenon that is Modern Warfare 2. Gears of War 2 is the goriest thing on the market. Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe exists, unfortunately. Life is good. We didn't know it yet, but the golden age of gaming was on the horizon. And what better way to kick it off than with the game that revolutionized the single-player genre, and really, gaming as a whole. The series, hailed by fans and critics as the greatest superhero video game series of all time, began its story on August 25th, 2009. Batman Arkham Asylum released for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC with an insane amount of hype and understandable amount of caution. Let's be real, superhero games didn't exactly have an insane track record up to this point. It was always hit or miss, and more often than not, it was a miss. To everyone's relief, this game wasn't just a hit, it was an absolute smash. Story, characters, atmosphere, gameplay, you think it, this game had it. I'm not saying this is God's gift to gamers, but I am saying it's very good. As is with everything, there are always going to be shortcomings or issues. I feel like this game kept those things to a minimum though, and we'll get into it all as the video goes on. I have played this game at least a dozen times, so instead of trying to capture my first playthrough, I want to talk through the different aspects of this game and my experiences over multiple playthroughs. We'll talk about story, gameplay, soundtrack, and design, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Batman Arkham Asylum's story begins where a lot of Batman stories end, with the villain, in this case the Joker, having already been captured and brought back into custody in Arkham Asylum, the moody and atmospheric setting where this game will take place. We get our first glimpse of the voice acting from legends Mark Hamill, who voices the Joker, and the late great Kevin Conroy, who voices Batman. These two are known by most as the definitive voices for these characters, and I can't help but agree. From the very start, these characters are oozing with nuance and personality. Batman's no-nonsense attitude and to-the-point comments offset perfectly with the Joker's disturbing comments and jokes, and it lends itself to this seemingly hopeless environment that feels like it's all but lost what it was supposed to stand for. We're introduced to Killer Croc, who is terrifying enough to see as an adult, and much more so to 9 to 10-year-old Jimmy. After Croc's gotten plenty of my scent and made a wonderful promise to end my life, we move on and eventually meet Commissioner Gordon. All seems well until it doesn't. Surprise, surprise, the Joker escapes. And what's worse, the Joker wanted to be captured all along. It's up to Batman to stop him. This is where we start the real game. This is also where I stop describing every second of the game and start getting into its major parts. One of the biggest things that people called out about this game was the fact that Batman didn't see this coming. I honestly don't see the issue. I mean, it was clear Batman was expecting something, especially considering Joker's goons just coincidentally ending up on the island too, and he says as much multiple times. Furthermore, he isn't really given the option to stick with the Joker until he's placed in a cell. The end-all be-all is that this game has to happen somehow, and this is a pretty good way of doing it. The characters are all amazing in this game, and the voice actors absolutely nail their performances. All of these different stories and events tie into each other perfectly, each villain trying to get their own gain out of the situation, Batman trying to restore order one bone-crunching punch at a time, and the Joker masterfully puppeteering it all. The plot revolves around the creation and perfection of the Titan formula created by Dr. Young and financed by the Joker without her knowledge prior to the start of the game. The Joker intends to use this formula to create a private army of monsters. We see it used throughout the game with varying levels of success, and it's really cool to see the progress that is shown as the game goes on. Batman is constantly held back by anything and everything on the island. Surprise visits from Scarecrow, which I'll get to soon, doctors and guards held hostage, and insane inmates at every turn. It gets hectic fast, and managing it is up to you as you make your way back and forth through the ever-evolving island. Poison Ivy plays a large role as well, and after being injected with Titan, she effectively revamps the map, making exploring it more difficult and requiring new routes to get to old locations. It keeps things new despite the setting being the same. Her fight with the Titan-affected plants, courtesy of Joker, used to annoy me so much as a kid, but it was so satisfying every time I blew up her protective shell to defeat her. In addition, her plants ended up being our ticket to stopping Titan, and there was only one place to get the plants we needed: Killer Croc's lair. This is such a quietly intense part of the game, walking uneasily through the sewers on flimsy wooden boards, waiting for the next time Croc pops up to chase us down. The last part of his encounter, where you have to wait until the very last second to get rid of him, scared the living hell out of me. I remember messing it up so many times because I would close my eyes out of fear when he got close. The Riddler throws his hat in the ring too, for no other gain than to prove his intellectual superiority to Batman, and in doing so gives us a great pastime for when we want to take a break from the story grind. I mentioned Scarecrow earlier, and he was just as scary as Killer Croc when I was a kid. I got chills the first time I encountered him. Seeing how the toxin affected Batman was bone-chilling, and I couldn't get out of the false room fast enough. It truly is satisfying to beat him, and in essence, overcome our fears later in the game. All of these pieces and more weave themselves perfectly alongside our quest to stop the Joker, leading to our grand finale: the fight for Arkham Asylum against the Joker. As I said before, the Joker has put himself in charge, and most things that go on are his doing. The fight against Bane and putting Scarecrow in your path are just two examples of this. In true Joker fashion, he plays up the finale as the party he's built up to all night, and his throne room is huge. He's captured Commissioner Gordon and forces us to fight more of his goons and Titan-affected monsters. After beating them, Batman is injected with Titan, and the Joker decides to follow suit. Honestly, I don't know what I expected, but it definitely wasn't this. This fight may look cool, but it wasn't really all that if I'm being honest. It's fun, sure, and seeing the Joker transformed is pretty cool, but it felt more like a fight against his goons rather than him. Pull him down, smack him a few times, run in circles to avoid him, and then do some real combat against random enemies while the Joker throws presents at you. While I wish I could have had a different fight against the Joker, this isn't a terrible fight, and it doesn't tarnish the game at all. I thoroughly enjoyed each part of this game, and it brought me to love combat games. It made me addicted to puzzles, and stealth became my favorite way to play any game. The story is an amazing one, and served as the best possible springboard for the Arkham games to come. In order to talk about the gameplay, I want to avoid comparing it to later games in the series, or against other games that would follow as the years went by. I only want to talk about how the gameplay felt when I experienced it. By the time I had started playing this game, I had gotten the hang of games for the most part. Learning didn't take long, and I generally picked up pretty quickly. When it came to Batman though, it felt like I was always learning. Learning how to be quicker, learning how to be quieter, learning how to be more analytical. The developers killed it with each variation of gameplay, and it shows. Let's start with the thing that had everyone talking about this game: combat. Free flow combat was absolutely revolutionary to the gaming industry. You had complete control of the flow of combat. Chaining a combo against multiple enemies seamlessly, making every encounter unique, and opening up doors for fighting styles. The world was your oyster. All these flashy animations and tricks were paired up with some absolutely badass sound design. Fists finding their mark on a poor thug, cutting through the air to land an insanely satisfying finishing blow on an enemy. That's not all either. Once you learn new skills like throwing thugs at each other and using items like the Batarang to maintain some crowd control, it gets wild. You will develop your own style, and you'll notice the difference in style when you watch others play. The game doesn't get stale either, mixing in other types of enemies as the game goes on. Inmates wielding knives, Titan-affected enemies that force you to wait before going in for the knockout, and more. Stealth is just as good as the combat in this game. As I said with combat, you'll develop your own way of doing things, clearing rooms and using the area to your advantage, blowing up walls to distract and knock out opponents, crawling through grates to pick off unsuspecting thugs. Unlocking other tools like the inverted takedown make it a lot easier, but the game evolves as you do, and won't let you take advantage of it for too long. Your brain is truly your biggest weapon, and I always got so much enjoyment of seeing how people did it differently than me. Traversing is fun too. Crawling through vents, breaking down walls, crossing huge gaps, all with the help of the tools that Batman has and develops along the way. Just like the asylum around him, Batman evolves too. New gadgets make you a more effective protector, and give you reason to go back to previously explored areas to find new spots. This game is all about improving through new challenges, using your head, and being your own player. I honestly felt like a better player the longer I went on. A lot of people who review games like this always say the same cringy line, "It makes me feel like them." That isn't the case here. Maybe this is just as cringy, but I don't think the game makes you feel like Batman. It makes you feel like your own Batman, complete and unique to you alone. Unique sections, like the Scarecrow fights, if you can call them that, are a great way of making sure things don't become too monotonous. I hated these sections. Not because they're bad, but because I was a kid, and the soundtrack paired with Scarecrow's maniacal laughter gave me nightmares. The reality is that these sections are nice, and almost like a little minigame break from all we've been dealing with. The soundtrack in this game is as recognizable as anything when it comes to soundtracks in games. Batman themes are about as iconic as it comes, and the task of reaching that level is not an easy one. Rocksteady was absolutely prepared for this challenge. As soon as you load into the game and get to the first cutscene, you are introduced to this world with this beautifully silent but harsh, intense orchestra as the camera pans down to the streets of Gotham. The music blends into a theme you will hear throughout this game, and will find its way into your head and never leave. The best part about the music in this game is that it almost feels like it's speaking. It knows when to be louder and emphasize the moment. And when to retreat to a whisper to allow you to think.
Why you got the old man with her? Maybe she likes older guys. Stop yakking, you'll ruin everything.
It flows just as well in combat, and adds another layer to an already extremely satisfying and fun system.
Being punched in the face.
The ambiance of Arkham while you sneak around enemies echoes the main theme, but keeps its distance from that same intensity.
Wait here. It's not safe yet.
Even momentary uses of the soundtrack are executed beautifully. Hearing the intense and stressful music that plays when Croc is after you raises your heart rate in no time flat as you scramble to find where he's coming from. Or the music introducing a new area, such as the derelict underground section. The music in this game can be described as this: dramatic and intense. Every part of the soundtrack invokes a feeling of intensity and dread, like the music itself is trying to warn you of the next step, and warning others of your own presence. It's just one of the many areas that make this game so iconic. While we're on the subject of sound, another piece I'd like to talk about that I already touched on is sound design is a core part of the experience, and sells the game just as much as any other part of it. I mentioned the sounds heard during combat, and it truly is a big part of what makes it seem so satisfying. Other parts contribute just as much to the experience. Your cape unfurling as you glide towards a poor thug who has no idea what's coming. The doors slowly unlocking themselves, adding to the feeling of entrapment. Those are just a few examples of how sound design really sells a moment, no matter how insignificant it may seem. Think about it. How many times did you hear the jingle of the intercom, signaling a message, sick joke, or warning from the Joker? And how did that jingle change as time went on, signifying the deteriorating situation in Arkham? My favorite bit has got to be the interactions between thugs. I know this is more voice acting than it is sound design, but the people who played these characters are unsung heroes. Their conversations with each other are another iconic staple of the Arkham series, adding to the ambiance. Listening to the thugs instead of just jumping right into the action leads to some pretty cool world building. The thugs mocking Aaron Cash when he's trapped in the hospital. The thug telling a story about his non-existent sister. These things are very missable, but they were created anyway, just for those of us curious enough to listen. And their reactions to the environment around them are just as important. Anyone who's spent even a little time playing this game knows this line.
He's here!
The next time you pop into Arkham Asylum, take a listen. You might just be surprised by the level of detail you find. This game isn't really split into levels. It's all one long story, with tons of unique and interesting set pieces to explore. And these sets are beautiful to say the least. It really speaks to the quality of a game when the location alone can evoke emotion. The underground section in the late game used to creep me out. The aged bricks and exposed pipes made me feel trapped, and I wanted nothing more than to get out of there. I almost enjoyed the company of the thugs I was disposing of, as it meant that I wasn't alone, and as soon as the last thug was taken care of, the uneasiness crept back in. I'm not sure if that was intentional by the developers, and in all likelihood it wasn't, as I was just a scared kid, but if so, I'm extremely impressed. Another great example of how these sets create emotion is the section where you enter the main containment area for all the inmates. It's so loud and hectic, and all the inmates are locked away from the world. It created internal stress, and I have no doubt that that was the intention. The island itself is split into 3 parts: Arkham West, North, and East. Each part itself isn't a large area, but the maze-like buildings they contain certainly are. Despite not being so big, they still feel very explorable. As you progress, you'll unlock the ability to use gadgets that will allow you to reach new places. It adds to this feeling that there is so much more to this island than meets the eye, and begs for you to explore and find its secrets. Each section inside these parts of the island are, like I said, maze-like. It's very easy to get lost and turned around, and using your map is key to getting around properly. Intensive Care, Arkham Mansion, the sewers. They breathe cluelessness and thrive off exploration. The alterations of the map that happen throughout this game feel natural. The smaller things, like the bell falling from the tower, allowing access to an entrance you couldn't reach before. The larger things, like Poison Ivy's plants, as I mentioned before, turning the map on its head. Nothing gets stale, and like everything else in this game, the map requires you to evolve and think in new ways. The smaller sets, like boss areas, are well done as well, providing enough room for maneuver while being closed off enough to make you feel the presence of your opponent. Other areas feel like challenges, and some of my favorite parts are the 2 sections where it is imperative not to be seen. One section results in the death of the commissioner if you're caught, and another results in the death of multiple guards. These sections are not by any means complicated, but the areas are built in such a way that they allow you to move with purpose, getting through as quickly as possible. It just adds to that feeling of being your own Caped Crusader, seeing the challenge and tackling it like it's nothing. This game, and more importantly this series, is one of the greatest of modern gaming. It changed the way I play games, and was one of the first games that made me feel like I had truly reached the end of a journey. It was one of those experiences that leaves an empty spot when you finish, and has you longing for more. This game set the bar for Arkham games to come, and it set it far above the ceiling. It crawled so that Arkham City could fly. Don't worry, we'll cover that game too. But until then, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in episode 3 of my gaming journey.